Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. The Patriots play the Raiders on Sunday, but there are troubles afoot. We're going to talk to Phil Perry at the top of this pod about Mac Jones, his tenor in front of the media on Wednesday, and whether the Patriots offense is kind of betwixt and between in terms of personnel and what they had hoped to do philosophically last year. We'll also talk to Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. He's always got great insight from a league-wide perspective on all the teams and specifically on the Patriots over the years of covering them. He's been as plugged in as anybody in the national media. But first, we're going to lead off with a little Mac Jones talk. And to get into that, let's take a look at Mac Jones' numbers from the last time they played the Raiders. That was last season. Not good. There it is. Brought to you by Shaw's, perfecting the art of fresh. 13 for 31, Mac Jones was in that game. The Patriots fell behind 17-3. They tied the game at 24. And then one of the worst plays I've ever seen unfolded. So, where is Mac going into this week? You know what? Let me give you one more. Here's Mac's stats over the last three. Have fun with this little full screen. We like to call it a full screen in the business. Yeah, our guy has not cracked 60% completion percentage. He's got 4 picks. He's got 2 fumbles. He's got a mountain of adversity staring him right in the mug. We'll hear from Mac right now and then bring in Phil.
Mac, both your head coach and offensive coordinator have reaffirmed their faith in you as this team's starting quarterback.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, and how do you take that going forward?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think a lot of that is really good, and a lot of things I need to improve as a quarterback. So that's what I think of. What can I do better? You know, what are the actual issues instead of just like throwing stuff up in the air? Let's look at the tape, you know, like the plays in the game, 11 on 11, and really see what's going on. That's the important part to me, because you can always try and problem solve that way, but when you're kind of just chasing different things and narratives and things like that, it's hard, right? But when you sit in the room together and look at the tape, there's a lot of things that you can be like, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to try and, you know, do this drop on this play or read it this way or whatever. So it's all about trial and error, but at the same time, you want it to be really good on game days. And that's where, you know, I've been disappointed with myself because it hasn't been great on game day. So why hasn't it? And that's something that I've focused on.
There he is. It's the inimitable Phil Perry. Hi, Senator.
Hello. What do we got going on this week?
Well, we got a Mac Jones discussion. We're going to try and throttle it back. Going to try not to fire any legendary coaches nor bench any first-round picks from Alabama. What I want to discuss is, you know, while I said that there's some sense in benching Mac, I got to reiterate that was just till he got his stuff together. You know, he is the best that they've got. Didn't mean forever. He's not the root problem. But after we listen to him talk, I just don't think his footwork and his eyes and having a good time out there are the silver bullet he thinks they might be. I think that the problems that he encounters and exacerbates are root problems with the offense that are impossible for Mac to fix on his own.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, some of the stuff, the fundamental stuff would help, though. You know, there are moments where his footwork, even when he's not pressured, Tom.
Okay. Even when he's gotten time, even when it's not a jailbreak, his ass is going backwards and he's falling and his body's open and it looks ugly.
Right. So in order to, in my opinion, take advantage of the few plays that do play out the way you draw them up, the ones where you do have enough time to go through your progressions and step into an accurate throw, you got to take those, because they're so few and far between that if you're creating your own pressure in those spots, the rare occasions where you're not actually being pressured, you're giving yourself no chance to have any sort of success offensively. But you're right. I think the base of it all stems from he doesn't trust anything that's happening in front of him along the offensive line, because they are, by many metrics, among the worst, if not the worst, pass protecting offensive line in football. They can't run the football, so that takes away a lot of the play action stuff that when he's had the opportunity to do it this year, he's had some success with. And then they don't have receivers on the outside that can separate. So again, when you do have that time, you have to try to maximize whatever small little windows you have there, because they're going to be small and you're going to have to throw guys open. That's just where they're at right now offensively.
It's funny too, because you never know on which play you're going to have time because the defense, by its very nature, is trying to send 4, send 5, send 6, send 4 with stunts, play coverage. So it's a lottery for him every time his right foot hits the ground as he begins his drop. Am I going to have time on this one or not? Oh, okay. Looks like I'm going to have time. I can actually use my eyes correctly and step into the ball. He's he's set up to fail, and he's living up to the failure. Here's an interesting thing about Mac, though, Phil. For as often as he is in the middle of a stampede, the running of the Bulls, we found a stat from a guy named Travis May, who does a lot of stuff on Twitter. He works hard and tries to come up with some numbers. And by looking at a couple of different metrics, he was able to establish that Mac Jones is actually second in the league in terms of sack probability over expected, meaning that he should be sacked more often than he is. Sam Howell is the worst in the league at taking sacks. He shouldn't have taken that. Daniel Jones, second worst. Anthony Richardson, Derek Carr, Deshaun Watson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Tannehill, Desmond Ridder. A lot of the usual suspects at the top of taking the most sacks. And then at the bottom of guys avoiding sacks, you got Patrick Mahomes taking almost 5 fewer sacks than expected. And then Mac Jones is taking 3.42 fewer sacks than expected. So on one hand, you'd think that was good. On the other hand, that's like, I'm not taking this sack. Throw it to the New Orleans Saints defensive lineman for a pick 6. That's the flip of it.
It is. And even on some other plays where the results might not be that disastrous, you're still maybe not giving yourself the best opportunity to have the best play, meaning if you understand as soon as you see the opposing color jersey start to flash in front of your face that I'm getting to my check down no matter what, whether his head is even turned around and ready for this pass or not, I'm going to avoid the sack. And I do think it's a valuable skill to have. I just think there are situations in which where you're better off being willing to take the hit and make the play down the field because your offense needs it. It is tackle football, Tom. You have to be able to deal with pressure in many circumstances at that position. While it's great to avoid the -8 that you get with a sack, you also have to try on the opposite end of the spectrum, make some plays that maybe shouldn't be there to be made because of the pressure, but you're going to overcome that and you're going to elevate your team because of it.
It's so complex and compounded. And Doug Kyde and Andrew Callahan from the Boston Herald wrote a long story today that really puts a lot of the blame at Mac's feet. And there's certainly some that it deserves to be there a fair amount, but the elemental problems of no pressure. And when you say, throw it to your check down, throw it to your outlet, find your guy, they don't have a guy the way they've had. So you have a stationary quarterback with no protection and a weak arm with no outlet type receivers. Of course, he's going to look horrible. And that's what's interesting because he does. Quarterback efficiency throwing outside the numbers are as you would expect. Here's the top 5 guys: Purdy, Allen, Tua, Patrick Mahomes, and Russell Wilson. He's the outlier. Bottom 5 guys: Garoppolo, Burrow. He'll be fine. He's got a bad ankle. Zach Wilson, Kirk Cousins, Mac Jones. Mac Jones is the worst in the league with quarterback efficiency throwing outside the numbers. That's a noodle arm, a lack of protection, and a lack of guys who can really make plays out there. It's also a defense saying, have fun, Mac. There's no shot you're going to complete it out here, buddy. Here we go. 1-on-1 on the outside. There is nothing that footwork or eye training can do to fix these elemental problems.
And what's interesting about that is the amount of man coverage that they've faced, right? And they have seen as much or more than any team in the NFL because they're daring Mac Jones to beat them 1-on-1 on the outside. The sheer nature of the fact that you have that many 1-on-1s on the outside means you should be good throwing outside the numbers. The throws that are hard to make outside the numbers, generally speaking, for the rest of the league, are when you've got 2 safeties deep and you've got a guy who's over the top of your outside receiver, and then you have a corner who's able to play underneath because he knows he has help over the top. Those are the borderline impossible throws. The 1-on-1s, Tom, are the ones you should be attacking and you should be having a lot of success with. And so you're right. There's a variety of factors that go into it, but they just can't do anything outside the numbers right now. I did find when I was looking for ways to try to fix this offense, I did find that there's a section of the field where he's actually not all that bad. He's a top 12 quarterback in terms of EPA per play when he's operating between the numbers. So
10 to 15 yards.
And 10 to 20 yards down the field. So that intermediate range right in between the numbers in the middle of the field. Now, how often can you even attack that range of the field? He has 17 attempts in there through 5 games. It's not a massive sample size. And they probably can't do it as much as they would like because of protection issues, because the guy's not being able to separate when teams are clouding the middle of the field with a lot of defensive backs. There's a lot that goes into this. But when he's targeted that area of the field, he's been pretty good. He's been pretty good. He's been near the top of the league when it comes to yards per attempt and quarterback rating and all that sort of stuff, EPA, some of the more advanced analytics as well. So can they find a way to throw it more in that section of the field? I don't know. Maybe it's more play action and trying to throw it over the heads of linebackers and safeties that are crashing down towards the line of scrimmage. But to even get to play action, Tom, the score has to be reasonably within reach, because when you're down 16-0 and 24-0 and 34-0, play action loses its effectiveness. So there's a lot of issues for them right now. And probably goal number one should just be, can we keep the score close so that we can keep our run game alive and we can keep our play action game alive? Then maybe we'll have a chance.
Yeah. So that means if there's pressure this week, you do the old Tony Eason. Fortunately for you, Phil, you didn't have to witness that. It was Tony Eason was basically kicking around when you were 0, 1, and 2 years old. Pressure would come. Eason would lay down like a newborn fawn in the forest. If you got to do that, you got to do that, but just don't exacerbate it. Get the beeper ready, because as you're talking and as we're looking at these numbers, Bill Belichick couldn't have up this offense any more if he tried to. You move on from a great quarterback. You don't have an idea what to do afterwards. You walk away from talented players like a Jacoby Myers. When you do binge, you bring in players who aren't good, like Nelson Aguilar or Johnny Smith. You don't know what you want at tight end, so you draft a couple in 2020 who can't play because you wasted time on the position. Then you go 50-50 when you splurge on them. You have an offensive line that has as a linchpin one of the most inconsistent players at any position in professional football, and that's Trent Brown. You reach at guard, and now the poor kid's injured in Cole Strange. David Andrews is getting older. Mike Onwenu is coming off of surgery, and you knew that you needed a right tackle, or everybody on the planet except for Bill Belichick understood that you needed a right tackle, and you dragged your feet on the position. Now you have wide receivers who can't separate. I mean, you had to work at it to make it this bad. This is just an investment in figuring out, here, what should I do here? Well, it looks like I should probably re-sign Jacoby, of course, because he's pretty good. Let's make him a priority. Let's make him a low priority, though, because God knows we don't need a guy who's established here and can absolutely work in this system. Why don't we get rid of him, and for just a smidge less money, we can bring in a guy who's been injured and has never worked here with our players and might not be able to work with the team in this offseason. See how he works out. But Bill, it's only $11 million. We just did that with Nelson Aguilar, and he sucked while he was here. Shouldn't we do that for Jacoby? I said low priority. Don't worry. When October comes, I'll say he was a priority. I'll just leave out the low. It pisses me off just because we're sitting here. Here's why it pisses me off. I know I'm objective, and we're just supposed to watch the team. It pisses me off because then we sit here on Thursday in the morning putting a pod together saying, well, how could they fix it? You can't fix it. You can't. Anyway, talked to Matt Slater, Mike Onwenu, Hunter Henry in the locker room, kind of off to the side on Wednesday. I said, how would you guys cover this team? What would the context be? And Matt Slater, all of them were like, hey, you got to do what you got to do, And Matt Slater was the best. He said, look, you've covered this team for a long time. You're entitled to tell the truth. You always have. So tell the truth. But those guys are soldiering forward. They do acknowledge how bad the team is right now, though. So I ask you this one very simple question, which would be the key to Sunday. Sorry for riffing so long. How do they deal with Maxx Crosby? We saw the numbers 13 for 32 last year in Max's performance against the Raiders, 112 yards. Arguably his worst game as a pro, but he's got a few others. How do they deal with Maxx?
I would say you don't want to do what you did against Cam Jordan during the 2-minute drill, which is leave him alone one-on-one with Vidarian Lowe at right tackle. And that's often where Maxx Crosby aligns. He's going to be coming off that side. You've got to give Vidarian Lowe, because he's Vidarian Lowe, you've got to give him help. I mean, you just can't go into a situation where everybody in the building knows you're going to be throwing the football and not give that guy a little bit of help against one of the best pass rushers in football. So it hurt him last week against the Saints. You can't let Maxx Crosby ruin the game. I don't know if that means Ezekiel Elliott has to be out there more, Tom, because he's such an experienced pass protector. And so maybe he's a little bit more effective with some of those chips and those releases into the flat. Ramondre Stevenson hasn't done enough this year to say, well, you got to have him on the field. So maybe it's a tight end, but do you really want to keep Hunter Henry closer to the line of scrimmage and attached to the line of scrimmage for longer into a given snap? Because he's maybe your most dependable pass catcher, period, across positions right now. So you're going to waste a lot of time with him chipping Maxx Crosby at the line and then letting him get into his route. I don't know how you do it, but you have to give people help when you're talking about Maxx Crosby, because he's one of the best pass rushers in the game. He's got a lot of really special physical gifts, and you can't let him ruin it. It has to be near the top of the list of, there's that word again, priorities this week.
I could see some two-man routes for the Patriots. Everybody stays in. If that's going to be the solution, that's going to be the solution. That's probably the most obvious and evident solution the Patriots could have this week. We say, how do you fix it? Because once they saw the hit the fan last week, they did start keeping more people in, and Mac had time. He made a couple completions to Kendrick Bourne. Of course, there was the obvious Saints are like, whatever, go ahead, get a 15-yarder, hit a Bourne. I don't care. But I really do think that if you have to put just two guys out in the route to get full protection, do it.
And you have to run the ball. I mean, you can't get away from it just because you've been so bad at it. They're 29th in the league in yards per attempt on the ground, Tom. It's horrible. But there are a few specific kinds of plays where they actually have been, dare I say, mediocre. And wouldn't you take mediocre right now if you were the Patriots offense? They're 16th in the NFL in the last 3 weeks. So since the Jets game, they're 16th in the NFL, right in the middle of the pack in terms of positive play percentage. This is based on expected points added, EPA, when they run either inside zone or duo. So you're hitting it between the tackles, generally speaking. A lot of times, especially with this duo play, the Patriots call it their gap play. But you get double teams at the line of scrimmage, and then you get guys leaving those double teams to go wall off linebackers. They haven't been horrible when they've run those types of plays. So you just slam it up, right up the middle, right up the gut, right at those defensive tackles. You try to double team them to create some space and get some yardage that way. And then you hit them over the top, maybe in that middle of the field, down the field a little bit that we're talking about through the year in the play action game. And maybe that's enough to sort of keep Maxx Crosby and this Raiders defense at bay.
Let's just delve into one other thing before we let you go, guy, and bring in Mike Florio. The Raiders offense is nothing to get too excited about either. The Patriots have actually been over 300 total yards 2 times this year. The Raiders have only done that once. They're 2 of the worst teams in the National Football League on third down. Yards per play, 2 of the worst teams in the league. They have Jacoby Myers. They have Jimmy Garoppolo. They have not played the same schedule the Patriots have had, though they did play the Bills and they got their asses handed to them. They have Devontae Adams. But they're just as bad as the Patriots. The common denominator is the basic general scheme that both the Raiders and the Patriots run. I don't care how different Bill O'Brien does things, or it's the same elemental scheme in terms of the quarterback and how to run it. Is this an indication that that scheme is stale and should be put out to pasture, taken behind the barn, had some dirt thrown on it, whatever you want to call it?
No, I don't think so necessarily. I mean, there are things that I think this particular scheme does not use in the same way that some of the best offenses in football use those same elements, like, for instance, motion at the snap. But in order to use those things and use them effectively, I think there's certain personnel that you have to have on your roster that neither of these teams really have right now. I mean, you look at their receiver groups, and while Devontae Adams is one of the best receivers in football, he's not exactly a speed guy, Tom. He can hurt you downfield because he's so good at tracking the ball. He's got good size. He has great hands, and he's an excellent route runner. He might be one of the best in football, but he's not a Dolphins level speed threat. You catch my drift. Jacoby Myers, we know, isn't that kind of player. So there are things that other offenses are doing that this offense, this Earhart-Perkins based offense, isn't doing in the same sorts of ways. And so maybe it holds them back, but I also don't think they're equipped with the personnel to do some of those things that the best modern offenses are doing.
Yeah. I mean, they got Josh Jacobs too. I forgot about that. One of the best backs in the league. You got plenty of guys who can play football. I think corners and the sub defenses and the speed of the pass rushers, I think all of it conspires to make it imperative that you have an unbelievable offensive line and receivers who separate. That's how you start an offense. You want to say a quarterback is just a figurehead and you can plug and play with that, fine. But you better spend so much draft and free agent collateral on offensive line and receiver. And again, the Raiders have it in place and they still don't have a good enough offensive line. The Patriots don't have it in place and they have not spent enough draft nor free agent money and collateral on those positions to make them good. Nor when they did do it, did they get the right people. I want James Jett for both of these teams. What a great name. Remember Raiders receiver James Jett with a double T. Phil, can this game be played in the mid-20s, or are we looking at just another one of these trip to the refrigerator and nothing has changed situations?
I think it can be. I think you just have to, again, you have to manage the score. You can't get down as early as they've gotten down. Now, that's something that they do consistently, Tom, and maybe it's unavoidable for them. And they're the kind of team that if that happens again, we know they can't pull themselves out of it with their offense in terms of throwing the ball and getting back into games. And their offensive line is such that when they're forced into passing situations and they go up against somebody like Maxx Crosby, there's only so much you can do. So it could get ugly and get ugly fast if they get out to the kind of start that they've gotten out to consistently over the course of this year. But I think it's within the realm of possibility that this game is played in the 20s. Again, the Patriots, to me, if you want to run the football, this is a good time to do it. Bill Belichick told me at a press conference earlier this week, they're one of the best run defenses in the league. It's just not as far as I can tell. I went searching high and low for numbers, Tom, that would suggest they're a good run defense, and they're not out there. They're 24th in rush success rate allowed. They're 25th in EPA added per play on the ground. They're 24th in defensive DVOA. They're sixth most in terms of the yards after contact per rushing attempt that they allow. So they're a bad run defense. This would be the week to do it. Keep the score low, keep the game manageable, and see what happens in the end. Just don't start throwing it backwards all over the place, and maybe you get a
Who's feeding Bill these numbers these days? I mean, whether it's challenging as he did on Wednesday, the notion that the Patriots are the most pressured team in the NFL. I'm not sure if I totally agree with that number. Okay, so you're what, 31st, 30th, 29th? We're telling us a couple years ago, and this really slipped through the cracks a little bit, that Devon Godshaw is one of the best defensive linemen in all of professional football, right after he gave him a contract extension. Not to harp on Devon Godshaw in a stray way here. He's minding his own business, not doing much of anything. But that, or telling you that the Raiders are a really good team against the run, what is Devon Godshaw's purpose in professional football at this point? I just don't, to be a highly paid defensive lineman and be anointed as one of the best in football, I just haven't seen Devon Godshaw impact a game. It's like an ongoing agitation for me that I haven't articulated. What's exactly is he doing out there, Phil? You watch more film than me.
He's supposed to be their early down, run stuffing kind of guy who eats up blocks and allows Juwan Bentley to go make tackles all over the place. Now, Juwan Bentley does make a lot of tackles.
Yeah, he's been better.
Maybe Godshaw deserves some credit for eating some of those double teams, but for the money he got and for the billing that he got from Bill Belichick, as one of the best in the league at his position, he hasn't been that since he's been in New England.
On that note, love you, buddy. You going to head out to Vegas? Have a nice couple days. Relax. Okay? Don't need you up until 5:30 in the morning. Don't need you up by the pool.
We'll get about 24 hours in Vegas. It's a quick trip out, quick trip back. We got the breakdown on Monday. We're not hanging out in Vegas. We got to get back for the breakdown.
No. We'll do that at the Super Bowl. All right, fella. Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Phil. Phil Perry. There he goes. Love that kid. You know what? He is indispensable to me. And we've ended up being great friends. I mean, he'll make a face now and then, but he knows it. We're great friends too. He's my mentor. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/NSBO and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in Mass. Hope is here. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling helpline ma.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. Play it smart from the start. GameSenseMA.com or call 1-800-GAM-1234. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the great Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk joining us right now, and we can dispense with the niceties and get right to it. Everybody knows you by now. And I got to say, what inspired you to rank the Patriots 32nd in the power rankings?
Well, I would say there are 72 reasons for and 3 reasons against. How about that?
Fair. Very fair. 11 behind the Jets. They beat the Jets. I'm not really making a case here. I don't disagree with you at all.
That was 1,000 years ago. 38-3 against the Cowboys, I can excuse because the Cowboys will beat plenty of teams handily. That's how it works for the Cowboys. Get up a couple of scores, it becomes an avalanche. Their defense will stifle you. Their offense will continue to be efficient, and they will blow you off the field. To come home the week after that and to have that wake-up call become 34-0 shutout loss to the Saints, who are not in the same category as the Cowboys. That, to me, is the thing that says they just don't have it right now. You know, the old Parcells saying, they want me to cook the meal. They should let me shop the groceries. The cupboard is bare right now. They don't have the players right now. They don't have the talent right now. And it all flows to the guy who's both the coach and the de facto general manager, who spends the money, signs the players or doesn't sign the players, such as receiver Jacoby Myers, who they'll see this weekend in a different uniform. One of the guys, rare guys they developed at receiver, and they let him walk away. It's just a bunch of bad decisions in recent years that have culminated in a team that isn't physically capable of competing with other NFL teams. And
that's why when we talk, go ahead, Michael.
Go ahead. It's your
we
show.
Talk about starting over, and Mac Jones talks about footwork and keeping his eyes in a particular place and trying to execute. You can't do, you can say all those things and you can go through your pre-snap checklist, but if they're on you in 1.6 seconds because one or both of the tackles missed their blocks entirely, well, all bets are off. And that's not going to stop happening. Might with Trent Brown if he engages a little bit, but it's not going to happen on the right side because Bill didn't staff that side. And there's no slot receiver. There's no third down back to throw to. And, you know, I don't think he could have created a worse offense for this team in a worse situation if he set out to do it. When you think about it,
I almost wonder whether he didn't pay as much attention to the personnel on the offensive side this offseason because he just assumed bringing Billy O'Brien back would solve everything. After last year's debacle, I remember last year when the Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, Frankenstein monster was taking shape. I said if this was any other coach, we would say, has he lost his mind? We gave Bill Belichick the benefit of the doubt because of those 6 rings that he's won as Patriots head coach. But it ended up being a complete and total disaster. And I think the people who ultimately make the hiring and firing decisions, the people who sign the checks, the people whose name rhymes with Kraft, look at that and say, it's inexcusable. And that doesn't go away. Nothing happening this year is going to make people forget what a crap show it was last year. And maybe Belichick thought, if I just bring back O'Brien, the offense will be fine. Never mind the fact that we don't have the guys up front to keep defensive linemen from getting to Mac Jones. Mac Jones isn't the kind of quarterback. The best quarterbacks in the NFL are the ones who can take the play that was called that falls apart and turn it into something else on the fly. Chicken salad on the fly. He doesn't have the mobility. He doesn't have the skills. He doesn't have the arm to say, the walls are closing in. Zoop, I'm going to run away from these guys and make something happen like the truly best quarterbacks in the NFL can do.
It's funny. And I subscribed, maybe as Bill Belichick did, to the notion that Bill O'Brien would be the magic wand that you just wave over the team and they'll retreat to being what they were at 2021 when the season ended. Even though they ended in a slide at that point, you had a player in Mac Jones who should be capable of kind of resuming where he was. And there were moments in which he did. But you're right, they're inherently overmatched. And the funny thing about Mac Jones is a stat bumping around right now that we mentioned earlier in the show. He's second in the league at avoiding sacks behind Patrick Mahomes. But there's a difference in the way he avoids sacks. He avoids sacks by reeling out of the pressure and flipping it nowhere in particular, sometimes to the other team, and it turns into a touchdown. So there's so many little statistics, that are misleading. It shocks me that they are this bad, but it doesn't shock me that we're into an end game conversation for Bill Belichick. What I'm shocked at, and I think you might be too, is I'm shocked that people are shocked given the number of breadcrumbs that Robert Kraft has dropped over the years saying, it's time. We need to be good again.
Tom, I assume you were standing there in March in Arizona when the question was asked, basically, does Bill Belichick get to stay as coach until he beats Don Shula's all-time wins record? And that is a very easy question to answer if the answer is hell yes. He's got 6 Super Bowl wins. He's got a lifetime job. Bill Belichick stays here as long as he wants to stay here. But that wasn't the answer. The answer was, well, I like all my players and coaches to have statistics and records, but we need to win. And we need to get to the playoffs. And then he followed that in June with the comment that he's only going to be satisfied with number 7. He isn't going to win 7 games this year. So it's already out there. I tried to shine a giant spotlight on those comments when I saw them. I was stunned at how raw and candid it was. The evidence is hiding in plain sight. If you don't get to the playoffs, if you finish last in the division for the first time since 2000, Belichick's first year on the job, it's over. My only question is, does it end before the end of the season? If they can't do something against the Raiders, I mean, they got the Dolphins and the Bills up next, right?
Yep.
Bills, Dolphins, I think in that order.
Bills, Dolphins, and then a couple Commanders, but there's no layups. The layups, it's a no layup zone now.
There's no layups. Look, I was talking to a coach in the offseason about the chess match that is professional football, and Bill Belichick is the master at the chess match. He's the grandmaster at the chess match. But the coach pointed out to me it's not a chess match, and this wasn't in relation to the Patriots. There's an observation that I think applies. It's not a chess match if one team is all queens and rooks and the other team is pawns. Now, the Raiders aren't queens and rooks, but the Patriots are looking like pawns right now. If you don't have the raw physical ability to stack up to even get you to the point where your mastery of X's and O's and studying film and finding tendencies and cracking codes and fooling defenses and fooling offenses will matter, it doesn't matter. You can't even get to that point when your team is that overmatched. That's the problem. And it all flows to the guy. And this is another thing that Kraft will subtly say, or otherwise from time to time, Bill's the one making all these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Kraft doesn't meddle. He gives him the keys to the car and he lets him drive it. And, the question becomes, at what point do they change the locks?
What exacerbates this to a degree is it's not just personnel and having pawns. It's the fact that when these games start, they fall behind 16-0 to the Eagles and 17-3 to the Dolphins, and 28-3 to the Cowboys, and 24-0 or whatever it was to New Orleans, and 22-0 to the Bengals, and 17-3 to the Raiders the last time they saw them. This is all in the last 11 games. They've fallen behind desperately, even against Skylar Thompson, even against Colt McCoy. They fell behind in those games. They're not ready to go. So they're ill prepared for the beginnings of games. And as I said earlier this week, they're ill prepared for the seasons to start. If you're going to say after 5 games, time to start over, you don't get that luxury. You're not 3-2 starting over. You're 1-4 and listless. So to me, the lack of urgency about the situation has bled into the product on the field too. I'm just observing. There's no question there.
I still don't know what it means to start over. How do you start over 5 weeks into a season after everything you've built, after everything you've done, after everything you've attempted, to have it go so poorly? How do you start over when there's another train coming down the tracks and another train coming down the tracks? The metaphor I use all the time, you're trying to change a tire on a moving car. He's trying to change all 4 tires on a moving car. How do you do it? How do you do it? And, the Mac Jones development or regression or whatever, even with Bill O'Brien there now, what happened last year, a full season of potential growth by Mac was flushed down the toilet. So now he's basically where he was after his rookie season and in worse shape because his confidence is shaken. How do I trust what I see? How do we undo the damage that was done last year to the relationship between him and Belichick, to just his overall ability to feel good about what he's doing on a football field? It's going to take him a while. He needs a hard reset. He probably needs a fresh start with a different team to make what happened last year completely go away and remove itself from his football psyche. So that's part of it too. It really is a mess.
Yep.
I didn't think we'd ever see it from the Patriots. I thought that Bill Belichick would always have some sort of an answer to at least be around 500. This really is a disaster. And, the Jets arguably should have beaten them that day. They could be winless, arguably should be winless. And I don't know where the next win is.
You mentioned perhaps if it continues this way, and I agree with you, if it continues this way with 30-point losses, non-competitive, you have to look at, okay, we can't run this out there another week. No one's coming to the games. No one's watching the games. It's toxic. And you could say, Bill, we need to make a move here. But unless Bill voluntarily says in the middle of the season, yeah, I'm not getting to them, I'm stepping aside, which I don't think that he would ever do, you can't remove him from his post in the middle of the season because his sons are on the coaching staff. Gerard Mayo is, has been brought here by him, Troy Brown. The entire ecosystem is flown or flowered off of Bill. There's no one here who wouldn't say, but if not for Bill, I don't have anything. Christ. I mean, I can say it. Wouldn't have anything, but I've had a tremendous career covering an outstanding team and have my profile rise because I covered the guy. This isn't pleasant, but facts is facts. I can move on. It's going to be hard for people in the building to move on if they ever decided to do anything during the season.
And I think when you consider the upbringing, the very strong military connections, he's not wired to jump ship. He's going to go down with the ship. It's going to be Custer's last stand. He's going to stand firm in the face of every last bullet, even if it means going 1-16. I don't think he walks away. And I think that's a great point. If you tell him to go, what happens next? But we need to be realistic about one important thing. And this is a point that Chris Sims makes as it relates to the media interactions with Bill Belichick. He's been such a jerk for so long and gotten away with it because he's been a winner. The chickens are coming home to roost. The knives are out. People aren't going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's always been on the wrong side of pleasant to deal with. I wonder at what point the players stop listening to him. Because again, you command respect. You command that reaction when you have recent pelts on the wall. When the team is falling apart and things just aren't working, at what point do the guys in the locker room say, we just got 12 more boxes to check before we can hit the offseason and figure out who we're playing for next year, whether it's a different coach or a different team or whatever, but we're just not listening to this guy anymore. He's on his way out. We don't fear him anymore because we've all accepted the fact that once this season ends, he's gone. So it really tests the loyalty that the players are going to have to him, just given the coaching style that we know he's engaged in all these years.
There's 3 statements Bill's made since 2019, and I'm going to let you go in a second, but I think you'll find this interesting, that might slide by or just not be connected to each other. In 2019, you'll remember, after they lost to the Titans, a question was lobbed to him, what do you have to say to your fans who've been with you through thick and thin? And I don't blame him for saying there hasn't been a lot of thin around here. 2020, he was on with Charlie Weiss, and he articulated that season wasn't going well and their spending was down because it was kind of a reset. I know the people in the building at that time said, reset? No one told me it was a reset. Do I still have to stay here until 2 a.m? And then this past spring, when asked why Patriots fans should be optimistic, Bill kind of mumbled, I don't know, past 25 years. There is, to me, if you're Robert Kraft, an inherent, I am entitled to do these things without having to deal with the consequences because of, look at all I gave you.
Or answer to anybody. I don't have to answer to anybody. That's always been his attitude. I answer to no one. I don't have to answer your questions, Tom Curran. I can just grumble my way through it. I can say on to Cincinnati over and over again. I can say we're starting over, even though nobody knows what the hell that means. That's the attitude. And that's one of the reasons why, frankly, I was having a conversation with someone about this recently. One of the reasons so many of his lieutenants fail elsewhere, they carry away a baked-in arrogance that only gets erased when they're fired. They aren't humble. There is a lack of humility throughout that football operation. And this is the time for humility. The problem is, number one, it probably won't matter. And number two, he won't be there next year. So we can see how a chagrined, humbled Bill Belichick will go forward with his coaching career. I mean, I feel like this is it. Because we already saw the handwriting on the wall from Robert Kraft. And last place in the division, not making it to the playoffs, it's done. The only question I have, Tom, what happens next for both sides? What happens next for Belichick? What happens next for Kraft? That's what's going to be fascinating after the season ends, if there's a mutual parting. And I think that's what it'll be, mutual parting or resignation or whatever. He won't be fired, but he will be fired. He will be done. And both sides will move forward. And that could be fun to watch.
I hate to do this because I'm gonna, because I love you. Will there be, what level market will there be for Bill Belichick if he is separated from the Patriots at the end of the year?
Not the same that there would have been 5 or 10 years ago. And
will it be low? Will it be a handful of teams that are already good? Will it be somebody who thinks he's going to sell tickets? Will it be?
Here's what you need. You need an owner that is willing to fire everybody and start over again. Because Bill Belichick's not going to come in as the coach answering to general manager. Bill Belichick's going to want to run the show, or he's not going to coach. So you got to be willing to basically gut your operation and hand it to him. And a point that was made to me, remember when the Seth Wickersham reporting emerged about the Palace intrigue with Brady and Garoppolo and Kraft and Belichick, and Gary Myers just kind of out of the blue threw out this idea that Belichick would like to go coach the Giants. Somebody made a very good point to me at the time, and you may have heard the same thing too. Wherever Belichick would go, it's going to take him 5 years to get everything he has in place in New England. 5 years. Does he have 5 years? Does he want 5 years? Is he sufficiently patient to take his lumps? And the other side of it too is
he good at it?
Well, I think he's learned he needs to go to a place that has a pretty damn good quarterback. I think we have learned that even though Brady maybe doesn't become Brady without Belichick, Belichick isn't Belichick without Brady. You got to have a good quarterback, a dedicated, committed, work every day of the year, all in, lead the players, be the surrogate for the coaching staff who holds everyone accountable and gets in guys' faces and helps you achieve what you're trying to achieve.
That's the truth.
Where do you find that? Where is that? Chargers? Is that it? And would Dean Spanos fire everybody and hire Bill Belichick to coach Justin Herbert? I don't know.
$25 million a year?
Well, it's not going to be the same market that would have been 5 years ago because he's damaged goods and that personality, he's not going to suddenly change, become warm and fuzzy. The media in any market where he gets linked is going to mobilize against him. You watch. They don't want to cover him. They don't want him there. They don't want to have to deal with him. And that's part of the price you pay for 20 plus years of being the way he's been during press conferences. And I'm not talking out of school here. We've all seen it. And you've been on the front line of it.
Yeah. And it's funny. He's more under siege than he's ever been. We always seen him clipped, but you can feel as if he's under siege. And for some reason, I remember back to the letter that he wrote to Donald Trump, that Trump read aloud. And he said, "You've run a beautiful campaign despite the constant unfair attacks by the media throughout." And Trump read that on the eve of the election. And I just think back to that as I think that Bill will look at it the same way. He's not engaging with us now. It's just clipped. He looks like he's under siege. He looks like he feels persecuted, and he's not going to answer the questions because he thinks he's being dealt with unfairly. So it's a very interesting human character study going on here. All right, buddy. Have a great weekend. God bless you.
Thank you, pal. Good talking to you.